Welcome, everyone. This is KPI Framework in Pipeline Management Processes of a top-performing sales org. We are very excited to share this with you. We've put this together from examples from working with our portfolio companies, and hopefully you guys find a lot of value in this and get some good takeaways that you can start implementing today. So first, I want to start with the agenda for today. As Christina mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A, but first I want to walk you through the core problem that we see here at Insight and working with our portfolio companies on the Sales Center of Excellence. I'll introduce myself here in a second more formally. We'll walk through a case study example. So we'll do it in a case study format so you guys get real world application into how we can help or how we've helped solve this problem and the tactics that we recommend. And we will go from there. So first I want to introduce myself. So my name is Brandon Jones. I'm the Director of Portfolio Revenue Operations here at Insight. And what I do is I work closely with our portfolio companies on all things sales operations, all things marketing operations. So you can think of that as CRM challenges, sales process, sales methodology, even to, like we talked about, marketing ops stuff with database and working with marketing automation systems. So prior to Insight, I was head of sales ops at two other tech companies, and I hold a few Salesforce certifications, as you can see here, and I've done a couple talks at Dreamforce. So I'm a big nerd on this kind of stuff, and I'm very excited to share this with you guys today as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the reason for this talk, so I'm on the Sales Center of Excellence here at Insight, and what we see a lot with working with our portfolio companies is a really common problem around sales inconsistency. So these are a couple of examples of reasons for that. And, we see reps or managers come in that have their own process and their own way of tracking things, and not everyone is on the same page. Not everyone is doing a uniform process or a uniform way of tracking. We then see sometimes articles where the head of sales will read something that says, the only KPIs you need to track, and it might be 3 KPIs or it might be 20 KPIs, and it tends to be a flavor of the week environment. So reps and managers are not aligned on what the key performance indicators are and what's expected of them. Another thing we see are forecasts being off and missing forecasts, poor forecast methodology is another huge occurrence. And finally, a misalignment between what marketing is doing, what sales is doing, and we don't see a lot of mutually supportive, actions between the two. So the reason I'm putting this slide up is to give you guys a baseline into why we created this presentation, and again, what we're seeing as a really common problems from our portfolio companies. And what we did was sat down and said, well, how can we solve for these? What have we seen work? What have we seen that hasn't worked? So it comes down to accountability. And I'm going to show you 3 things today that you can take, 3 tactics, 3 things that you can take away from today. But it really comes down to one thing, which is accountability. If everyone knows their role and what they're accountable for, and things are clear, what you'll notice is very predictable forecasts, alignment between sales and marketing. You'll also notice everyone is on the same process, everyone's working from the same playbook, and everyone's on the same page. So I'm going to jump into a little bit of the case study to give you guys an example, and then we'll jump into the three solutions. So the case study I want to use is a portfolio company that we worked with recently. Some quick facts about them. So they're doing an enterprise sales or in cybersecurity, you can see pretty large average deal size, pretty long sales cycles, and are selling through a field rep model. So the situation here, it seemed pretty common. This company misplanned. The sales org was showing, negative year-over-year bookings growth, and very few reps were actually hitting the target. And some of the challenges here were marketing had said, we're increasing the number of MQLs that we're passing over, but they weren't trickling through to sales results. The team couldn't really explain why they were missing plan, and there were different processes between different regions, different theaters. So I know I've been in sales orgs that look just like this, and you guys may feel the same way. This is a pretty common thing, and it's something that, as we've done this at Insight quite a few times, we started to put together the patterns and the pieces to help you solve for this. So this is the backstory. Here's what happened after we went in and worked with this company on, again, our one thing around accountability. We saw the senior reps, their biggest fear was if we implement a uniform process, our senior reps won't like it and they'll take off and go somewhere else. We didn't see that actually happen. What we saw was actually higher morale from the reps around clear expectations of what's expected of them and what they're being measured on. We saw better coordination between sales and marketing and a better out-quarter outlook with 5x coverage. So now I want to jump into these three things that we implemented and worked on, and tactics that you guys can take away on this call today. So the first we'll talk through, again, around accountability and being clear, is a clear, unambiguous closed loop process with standardized plays and tools. And I'll talk about what that means. Second, we're going to talk about narrowing in on your KPIs and making sure that everyone is on the same page as to what they're being measured against, and it's transparent. And again, we have everyone on the same playbook. Third, we'll talk a little bit about how you put all of this together and the way you inspect the pipeline. So we'll talk about changing the thinking around forecast calls and, again, moving to an accountable, disciplined cadence around pipeline inspection. So let's start with number one. So this is what we call a maturity framework around your sales process. So if you look at this, you may fall into one of these buckets. The company that we were working with in this example fell into bucket one, where they had done an okay job of mapping out what lead to close looks like, and they had mapped out sales stages. But if this is all that you've done, again, you'll see some of those problems that we mentioned in the beginning around inconsistent forecasts, everyone not being on the same page, and a lack of sales and marketing alignment. So this framework is what we can think of as an evolution to getting everyone to level 4. So the level 2 piece of this, you started to define a closed loop process around sales and marketing and getting some alignment. And you've then set some verifiable outcomes around sales stages. So not just having sales stages, but have set clear entry and exit points on your sales stages. Maturing from there is level 3. So this is getting into sales methodology, whether you use challenger sale, medic, any kinds of sales methodologies that are out there, and you've mapped them to the sales stages. And also you started to create a library for everyone to use around standardized tools and plays. And what I mean by plays are all of the deals that you win or the deals that you lose, you document that and you share those learnings, whether it's how to navigate an org and to get the sale moving forward, you document all the steps to success and you share these in a playbook. And reps can then go in and look at it and say, I have an opportunity that I'm working that's similar. Let me see what someone else did that I can pull from in a sales playbook. And then finally, level 4 is when you've done all of these things, but you've integrated them seamlessly into the CRM. So it's very easy for everyone to find. This creates true adoption around all of the hard work that you've done to put together a methodology, a solid process, all the tools in place. So let's talk a little bit about getting to level 4. So this is what an example of a closed loop sales and marketing process looks like. Marketing and sales would be completely aligned here, from inquiry to MQL to sales accepted lead to what happens when it becomes a sales qualified lead, and even expectations around sales follow-up. So thinking about SLA, is this aligned to the lead scoring model and how to think about that? So this is an example I wanted to flash here, but this gives you an idea of how granular you need to get to think about aligning your sales and marketing and having a closed loop, unambiguous process for everyone to follow. This is aligning on sales stages, and not just what are our stages if you look across the top, but aligning on what are the expectations for each stage. What do my exit criteria look like? And if you notice at the bottom in red, what we typically see is very common to have exit criteria that are seller focused. So what is the rep doing at each stage to move a deal forward? Where we see a lot of inconsistent forecasting or missing commit or upside is a lot of our portfolio companies will only have the exit criteria focused on what the seller is doing. We recommend adding in a layer of the buyer criteria as well. And what this does is it helps to curb an excited rep that is moving a deal forward because they are making actions, but you may not have alignment with the buyer. So again, we recommend creating what you may already have in sales stages and objective criteria, but also going further here, not only looking at what the seller is focused on and the expectations for the seller at each stage, but what you expect from the buyer and signals there. And what we find is this would really help you ground your opportunities in the correct stage. Another example here is looking at what we talked about with standardized tools in place. So you can take a look at this. This would give really detailed analysis of what to expect when speaking to, as you can see here, different roles: head of growth, head of analytics, head of product as an example. What are some of the pain points and roadblocks with working with these roles, and questions and things you should think about. What this does for the team is it, again, gets everyone on the same page, speaking the same language, and this makes everyone just as effective with all of your different types of buyer personas. So instead of closing deals and that data and that knowledge is not shared, we would recommend sharing this type of information, making it accessible in the CRM and easy to find. So reps can go look in the playbook, pull up examples, and use these to support the stuff. And again, this is another example using an org chart and having this in the CRM as well. Mapping it to the sales methodology, or mapping the sales methodology to your sales stages, again, was another piece of getting to level 4, but also burning it into the CRM. So you can see here we have an example of one of the vendors that we have recommended in the past called I See It. And check it out if you haven't seen this. This is a tool that will help you use something, for instance, here like Medic, and burn this into Salesforce where reps can check off Medic criteria and make sure that that's aligned with the sales stage. What this does for you, and I'll flip through this example and then also altify on the next page, but what this does for you is it gives you a level of visibility and inspection in the CRM to pressure test your commit deals, to pressure test deals and pipeline reviews, to really understand and go beyond just what stages it is, but also look to deal quality and making sure that the deals have everything that that is expected at each stage. So we're going to move on from here and go into step 2. So in step 1, again, to recap, we talked about clear, unambiguous process to get everyone on the same page, whether that process is sales stages, sales methodology, tools, playbook, getting everyone on the same page, the sales and marketing alignment, everything needs to be clear and unambiguous. Step 2 is, now that you've done that, how do you take this and go about measuring the right data? And we get a lot of questions on this around, am I measuring too many KPIs? Do I have too few? What KPIs are best in class, and what should I track? So what we did here was pointed out a few of the common problems that we see. So one is a lot of sales orgs are only focused on outcomes. A lot of the dashboards and reports that go out will only focus on things like closed won deals, deals that are in commit, deals that are in upside, instead of focusing on what we call the leading indicators and activities that lead to those outcomes. The issue with this is outcomes are not within the locus of control of a seller. As much as I pound and try, I can't actually make a closed won deal happen, but I can do steps that lead to that deal. So we recommend focusing on more than just outcomes. The other piece is tracking KPIs that are not mutually supportive. This comes from Frankenstein KPIs, or KPIs that may have been implemented without the others in mind. So this often comes from a head of sales might see an article. The article mentions track these KPIs. He or she may see another article the next week, and you just start to piece together a bunch of KPIs that, to the seller and to the managers, don't really tell a story, and you lose efficacy in the KPIs that you're tracking. We see little attention to out of quarter and a lot of attention to current quarter or current month. And again, we recommend looking out and having that perspective when thinking about your KPIs, because it gives you some early signals into things that you can control and not waiting until you can't control them. And the last is, we see a lot of struggle with meaningful course correction. And again, this is a product of the third piece, which once you get so far down the path, if you have, for instance, in this portfolio company's case, really long sales cycles, getting into the current quarter when you want to close the deal is way too late for a 9-month sales cycle to affect any real course correction. So what we recommend is looking at it in 3 buckets. And the first bucket is the results or the outcomes. And you can see in the second line here we have general adoption. And general adoption means what we see across the portfolio. So everyone is tracking outcomes. And we mentioned that, again, closed won, commit, what your top opportunities are, those kinds of things. What we recommend moving toward is tracking all 3 of these buckets. So the second bucket, the leading indicators. And we see this as a mixed bag across, but this is looking at things like lead gen, opportunity creation, how well your opportunities are moving through stages. So you can set a number to say you need to have at least, let's say, 15 stage progressions this quarter. That would be an example of leading indicators that you'd want to track. And lastly, where we see very few of our companies and just out in the environment in general tracking our activities, particularly around enterprise sales motions. there tends to be a lot of belief that an enterprise rep can go out, they can track their own activities, they can hold themselves accountable to just getting to the outcome. And what we found is our best performing companies track all three of these buckets. They set clear expectations on activities, meaning things like demos, meetings, proof of concepts, prospect and partner meetings, and it's closely and clearly tied to the leading indicators, which are then closely and clearly tied to results. So our recommendation here, again, looking at our top performing companies, is to set your KPIs within each of these three buckets. And if you're within each of these three buckets, you're tracking the right things. So let's look at what that looks like. We'll look at what this looks like from an exec level. Again, we recommend creating a view and a dashboard for your executive team to track KPIs, whether it's a weekly cadence, monthly or quarterly. And we'll show you what that looks like. We'll use an example of putting this in Excel. And at a rep level or seller level, we recommend putting this in the CRM where the rep is living. And the benefit here is it's easier to hold everyone accountable when what you're tracking toward and the KPIs are clearly visible for everyone to measure themselves against in the CRM. So we'll talk about both here, but let's start with the exec level dashboard. So here's an example of the exec level dashboard, and we use this in Excel. You can use this in any platform that you feel comfortable in. But if you notice, we've got sales reps by row. We've got the results on the left, the year-to-date, quota and close and output. We've got some leading indicators in the middle under pipeline creation. And then we have activities on the right. And the purpose of setting it up this way is this tells a story. This tells a cohesive story. If we look at one row, we can see what the rep is doing on their outcome, KPIs, how the rep's doing on some of the leading indicators to those outcomes, and how they're doing on activity. And if we're thinking about this in a long sales cycle, activity that may be down the road and lead to outcomes in 6 to 9 months. Breaking this down a little bit, and again, the purpose of this is to be dynamic and prescriptive, but breaking this down, you can see the questions that should come from discussion here in terms of how have we done so far, what's our outlook for this quarter, what does it look like for next quarter, and again, tracking the activities to see are things translating. A great way to use this would be to look at your reps that have the outcomes consistently that you want, that are hitting quota or going above quota, and using this to measure how are they tracking on activities. So did the activities actually lead to the leading indicators that actually led to the outcomes? If you notice, here we're using some conditional formatting around the goals that are set at the top row. So if you notice that these aren't aligned, or you have a rep that is, has all the outcomes, has all the leading indicators, but your activities are off, you can use this to level set where the activity targets should be. And that's a way, again, to use this type of report. We also want to look at this at a rep level. And I'll go ahead and put these here so you can see this a little bit easier. But at a rep level, we've also categorized and organized this in the exact same way. So the reps and the exec team are looking at the same KPIs. They're looking at the same format of these KPIs in terms of what are your outcomes on the left? What does your outlook look like? What do the leading indicators look like? So again, we've got opportunity creation, out quarter pipeline. And then on the right, not only activity, but hygiene. So we're not only tracking meetings, but we're tracking opportunities with close dates that are in the past, or opportunities that don't have any activity in the last 30 days that are still considered pipeline. So again, the theme here is all about accountability. If it's clear to the reps what they're being held accountable to, and the KPIs make sense from a outcomes, leading indicators, and activities perspective, the alignment on the sales team and tracking and measuring to the right KPIs becomes that much easier. So now we'll jump into step 3. So again, to recap, step 2, we talked about measuring the right KPIs. We talked about including, there's flexibility in which KPIs you choose, but using a format and a theme of results, leading indicators, and activities as being the most effective of what we see on our best performing sales orgs, and aligning that to what the exec team is looking at and what the sellers are looking at in the CRM. So we're going to talk about how do you perform inspection. So now that you've set in step 1 very clear, unambiguous process and expectations, in step 2 you've set the KPIs that you want to measure against. So now we're rounding it out with how do we perform that inspection? How do we go about making sure that we're doing the right things? So this is an example of what we typically see. What we typically see when we talk to one of our portfolio companies and they tell us, oh, we have pipeline inspection, we have a forecast call each week, this is what we see. So the numbers here are the number of weeks in a quarter, and the green and the gray represent the activities around forecast calls and inspection. So if you notice, we've got a simple, each week it's the same forecast call, and we see a one-on-one pipeline review. The issue with this is there's no specific objective around what is to be covered on that call. So what we often see is spending half the time or more than half the time talking about the top deals and trying to squeeze in time at the end of the forecast call to talk about other deals. We also see unfocused topics from week to week. So reps go into this not knowing what they're being held accountable to, what will be asked of them about their pipeline. The calls are always just a little bit different. And as we mentioned before in this example, the portfolio company we were working with had pretty long sales cycles. So none of these call out a specific time to talk about out-quarter pipeline that is not closing this quarter or this month, but looking ahead to get ahead again to start meaningful course correction. So the way that we would recommend solving for this, that we've seen work really well in the top performing sales orgs in our portfolio company, is to break this out week over week with structured, focused, carefully orchestrated forecasting and pipeline inspection calls. So if you notice, this is a lot different. Week 1, we're looking at current quarter commit, but we're also having a meeting to talk about the push deals from the previous quarter. You can look at an example in week 2. Week 2 changes. Again, we're always looking at current quarter commit and pipeline review, but we're also adding in a topic around not only commit, but let's just look at your current quarter pipe and inspect it. And you can see how that continues in week 3, looking at top deals. So this is an orchestrated cadence that is set up and designed to have clear, focused calls each week, all around pipeline, but each serve a different purpose. And if it's clear when you have the schedule, reps go into the week knowing exactly what they're going to be held accountable for. They will update their own pipelines for next quarter, and you won't have to chase them because they know that in week 5, we're going to start talking about your next quarter pipe, or in week 9, or in week 12, talking about what is your commit for next quarter. So again, what this does is it creates clear expectations across the team. You'll notice more pointed and more directed forecasting calls. The calls should be shorter because if you're focused on one thing or one topic, it shouldn't take a ton of time as if you think about it, comparing it to an unfocused generic forecasting call. So to conclude this, and then we'll open up to some Q&A if you guys have questions. Think of this as 3 steps when you think about solving your, everyday common sales problems around making your forecast more accurate, getting everyone on the same process and on the same page, getting more reps to hit quota. Think about our theme around accountability and how it weaves into step 1, getting alignment between sales and marketing. Again, creating that closed loop, unambiguous process. Step 2, thinking about how you're defining your KPIs, making sure it's clear to everyone what they're being measured against, and make sure that they measure outcomes, leading indicators, and your activity. And finally, with step 3, when you think about inspecting this week over week to make sure it's working, instead of going for the generic forecasting call each week, think about breaking this down into focused topics so that reps will hold themselves accountable to updating their current pipeline, updating next quarter, thinking about their top deals, and all of these things ahead of time each week. So with that, we will open up to any questions you guys may have.
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to answer. Just pop in any questions that you have in the side panel. To get things rolling, we do have a question. So we already use verifiable outcomes and exit criteria, but from the seller perspective only. What is the purpose of creating buyer exit criteria?
It's a great question. So the purpose of creating buyer-focused exit criteria is to temper a seller that may be what we sometimes say high on hopium. They're really high on hope that the deal is moving forward. They've done everything on their side, but they don't have alignment from the buyer. And oftentimes what you see with this are deals that are moved into commit or deals that have jumped 4 stages or into stage 4, stage 5, where they really shouldn't be. And if you go through them, you can really inspect this deal and say, this deal should have never made it to this stage. What that typically does is it throws off the forecast, and you end up having reps where you need to adjust or discount their forecast because you know that this rep is moving deals forward where they shouldn't be. How you adjust for this with buyer focus is you can't really fake buyer focused criteria. If the buyer hasn't given you the signs, if the buyer hasn't done action, there's no way for you to artificially be in the wrong stage. So really it's about getting alignment between what you're doing as a seller, what the buyer has given you back, and the more clear you are about that, the more accurate you'll start to notice your forecast to be, because the deals will be in a more accurate stage.
Another one from Austin. Can you provide advice for convincing sales leaders who prefer ad hoc approaches and little structure to adopt this approach?
Yes. So it sounds like you're saying the sales leaders prefer kind of shooting from the hip as opposed to structured process and clear expectations. We actually see that often, and I would say the best way to get he or she on board is to share the learnings from this webinar with them, and particularly around the results that we saw when we came in and we did this with the portfolio company in this case study example. You saw in that slide where quarter to quarter they had missed plan. It was pretty random in terms of where they were going to end up. And you can challenge him or her to say, if we want to get more reps hitting quota, if we'd like to have more accurate forecasting and exceed plan month over month and get everyone on the same page, this is what we need to implement.
One quick question from Gary. Can you help non-portfolio companies?
So we do not. We open up things like this to non-portfolio companies, where on the on-site center of excellence, the sales center of excellence, we engage directly with our portfolio companies. But we often have our blog articles on our site. We have webinars like this. We do a lot of content generation that is open to everyone, and including all of you sitting on the webinar now. That some of you may not be inside portfolio companies, but you can still benefit and enjoy content like this.
So from Bob, is there a specific sales methodology, e.g. Challenger, Miller-Hyman, etc., that lends itself better to this approach? What do your portfolio companies use?
Yes. So we recommend going through, it's very similar to what I guess we'll say it like this. There's not a one-size-fits-all t-shirt for sales methodology. It will highly depend on your sales motion. If you have, or I guess thinking about your sales cycle and how much qualification needs to be done, and your complexity of sale. So there are some that lend themselves better to certain sales motions than others. We typically see a lot of adoption around MEDDIC because it's relatively flexible. But again, MEDDIC may or may not be the right solution for you. So I would dig into, like you mentioned, Miller-Hyman, Challenger Sale, MEDDIC, those things to see how they fit your sales motion.
Great question from Brooke. We're trying to ensure Salesforce becomes and remains our one source of truth for forecasting and pipeline. Can you share tips if we were to configure our executive level reporting separately in Excel or Tableau?
Yes. So your question, Brooke, is if you want to take the executive reporting out of Salesforce, do we have any tips on how to put that in Excel or in Tableau? And if that's the question, what we recommend is using the example here around structuring this in a way that is just clear and simple to understand. The way that we put it in our example, and I can flip back to it, the way that we put it in our example is not prescriptive in the sense that you need to do it like this. We think it makes sense when we break it down by the questions that are asked and grouping things together. So what we would recommend, whether you put it in Excel or Tableau, export the data out of Salesforce and put it in a format that it's easy to see what the outcomes are and how everyone is tracking to that and how you can compare to that and the leading indicators and the activities. But it's pretty open in how you set this up. This is one example that we did.
Anything else on Excel that you want to highlight?
The other piece about Excel is I think just again that you don't have to use Excel. You mentioned Tableau. Tableau would be an awesome way to show this, and it would be more visually engaging, I think, to do it that way. So what you choose from a tool perspective on how you show the executive dashboard is totally up to you. I think as long as you follow the principles around making it clear and easy to understand, organizing it by the types of KPIs, and also making it, like if you notice here, we use the conditional formatting to make it easy to spot high performers and performers who were behind pace.
Yeah, Derek agrees. He says, Excel is a great integration with Salesforce if you have the right version of Excel. Thanks, Derek. And one other question, is your cadence recommending we spend double or triple the amount of time we currently spend on our weekly forecast cadence?
That is a great question. And we do not recommend or are not recommending spending double or triple amount of the time that you spend now on your weekly forecast cadence. What we have found is the portfolio companies we've worked with and implemented this have actually saved time each week because the meetings are very pointed and directed. Everyone is on the same page with going around the room or on the call with what they are expected to bring. So we find that when the meetings are more focused and you replace the general forecast call that may be an hour or maybe 90 minutes with be tailored and curated and very focused meetings, you typically might even save time because everyone comes, they know what they're bringing. It's very clear. The meeting doesn't get derailed by someone's big deal that they want to talk about. So everyone knows, again, what's going to be discussed, what they're accountable for. And yeah, we challenge you to try it. We've seen companies implement this and save time and everyone be pretty excited about it.
Any guidance for getting top performing reps to enter activities into Salesforce? In many organizations, if you hit your numbers, you were given a lot of freedom to not log activity.
Absolutely. So there's two ways that we recommend getting top performing reps to enter activity, and even sometimes we see top performing reps not enter leading indicators, like not create an opportunity until it's in stage 4 or things like that. So the first way we recommend is going back to this. If you put something like this in front of the exec team and they are looking at a dashboard, what you'll notice is we're grading everyone not only on the outcomes, not only on leading indicators, but on activities as well. And if you have particularly long sales cycles and we're putting attention to subsequent quarters and out quarter, you will get a pat on the back for the outcomes that are today. But next quarter, if we're looking at that, you might be a red flag in this report where you're doing everything you can for the current quarter, but it's looking like at least you're in the red coming up. And you may get a pat on the back, or sorry, a tap on the shoulder that says, hey, we need to talk about your out quarter activity. We're concerned because, again, everyone's on the same page with expectations and accountability. So we want to make sure that that rep is doing what they need to do to be successful. Another way to look at this, and the second piece, is when you bring your, your pipeline, if it's focused on next quarter or thinking about things like that, to these types of forecast calls, and you don't enter deals until they're later stage, or you're just not doing, again, leading indicators or activity, it will show in these forecast calls. So if the forecast calls are only focused on current quarter, you allow things like that to hide. If you start to expose what's in the pipeline for subsequent quarters, everyone's going to bring that data to the meeting, and if you haven't entered deals or if you have bad hygiene around how you're treating things in the future, it will get exposed in these inspection calls. And that's the purpose, is to make sure that everyone's held to the same standard, everyone's accountable, and is on the same page. So hopefully that those two ways give you a way to think about getting people to enter things that may not be current quarter, but that may be activities or leading indicators that lead to next quarter.
Wonderful. And what are the start dates represented at the top of this scorecard? The rep scorecard.
So the start dates, what we found was these are the start dates of when the reps started in their role. What we found was when we had just splashed this up, a lot of times a rep would be new to the territory or new in the role, and they would show up red. And putting start dates gave context around, if we think about the sales cycle for this company being 9 months, if someone started 6 months ago, it will tell the story around, okay, they've been here for 2 quarters, but they haven't closed anything because they just started. So you can include these if it's helpful. I think it's helpful, especially when you get organizations that have a wide variety between reps that have been there for a long time and different expectations you may have for them, and reps that are new or have just started.
I think that was it. If we don't have any last questions, then I'll give you 10 minutes left. Have your day.
Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. The purpose is, again, to make sure that you guys have something that you can take away today, not just high-level stuff, but you have real tactical things that you can take away and implement in your organizations to, again, hopefully help you hit quota, hit plan, accurate forecasting, get everyone on the same page, clear expectations and accountability, and hopefully that helps make you a top performing sales org.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brandon, and thank you to everyone who joined. Expect an email in just a few hours with a recording as well as the deck from today's presentation, which you'll later find on the Insight blog. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.